Newswriter Jack Lee takes a deep dive into his writing process covering the life of Norman E. Borlaug. Student Senate had a busy last meeting of the year that included passing 4 bills, and members of the battalion's editorial staff discussed their Spotify Wrapped results. I'm Caroline Wilburn, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Batt Signal. Norman E. Borlaug saved about 1 million lives by breeding and distributing stronger varieties of wheat in the mid-20th century before teaching at Texas A&M until his death in 2009. Here to talk more about Borlaug's life and impact is news writer Jack Lee. Jack, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
So, Jack, you just wrote this amazing story about Borlaug, and you told a really great story of his life. How did you come upon this story idea initially?
Well, it was just a chance encounter at a MSC Scona talk, and Elsa Morano, the former president of A&M, happened to be there. So I was talking to Dr. Morano afterwards, and Dr. Morano was talking about her institute, the Borlaug Institute, which was continuing Borlaug's legacy by doing work in developing nations, bringing agricultural techniques to them. So I thought it sounded pretty cool. So I went down to the institute, talked to Dr. Morano, and, Dr. Morano, she was telling me about the institute, but, pieces of Borlaug's story were kind of brought up to me while we were talking. I thought, this sounds really interesting. We could look into this more. So that's kind of how it started, the whole idea of writing a story about Borlaug.
Okay, and so when you decided you were going to write this story, did any sources immediately come to mind that you wanted to talk to?
So, I talked to Dr. Morano, and Dr. Morano knew Borlaug very well, both as the president of A&M and afterwards. So that was the first source I talked to. And immediately afterwards, I wanted to talk to Borlaug's family, but that actually ended up happening last, and I'll get into that more. But immediately after Dr. Morano, I did some research about Borlaug, read some books about him. So, the Rockefeller Foundation, they helped him out a lot. So I reached out to the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, Dr. Rajiv Shah. I reached out to a lot of guys who worked with Borlaug at A&M. So, Ed Runge, he used to be the ag department head. And I reached out to some people that Borlaug worked in developing countries. So the Indian scientist M.S. Swaminathan, Ruth Onyango from Kenya. So those were some of the first guys that came to mind when it came to contacting sources.
Yeah, wow. Sounds like you did a lot of research on this. How do you think that eventually helped you when you were writing the story?
I think it helped a lot because, not just Borlaug, with all the stories, you generally want to get a very good idea of what you're talking about it and then just let it naturally flow onto the page. So that was the idea, it helped a lot just naturally understanding the story very well really enabled me to put it into words in the article.
So you said you talked to Borlaug's family. How did you get in contact with them, and then how was it to actually talk to them?
So they were the first. Borlaug's family were the first people I wanted to get in contact with, but it was kind of tough because their contact info wasn't publicly online. But it was actually Ed Runge, Dr. Ed Runge, the old ag department head, who put me in contact with Borlaug's daughter, Jeannie Lobby. So I gave Miss Lobby an email. I sent Miss Lobby an email, and she got back to me and she said we can do a call on Sunday. But I was working on the story for so long, and I was so invested in Borlaug's story, I felt I owed it to her to actually show up in person. I asked, can I actually come to Dallas and meet you? And she said, sure. So Sunday, it was Thanksgiving break. I took the drive down to Dallas to chat with Miss Lobby about her father.
Wow, that's amazing that you talked to her in person. How was that?
It was great. It was actually the first time I went to Dallas, and I got to see Dr. Borlaug's house, Dr. Borlaug's residence, and a lot of his awards, his Congressional Gold Medal, his Nobel Peace Prize. It changed things fundamentally because before that, Dr. Borlaug, he was a bit of an abstract concept. Even though I talked to people who knew him, people who worked with him, he was still kind of out there. But talking to his daughter, talking to his granddaughter, his great-grandson in person, it just became much more real. He said himself, as towering as the legacy seems, at the end of the day, he was just one man. So it was very humbling to see that put in perspective.
Yeah, so what kind of questions did you ask them while you were there?
I want to get a sense of Borlaug the man, I heard a lot about, what he had done, the great things he had done, the genius that allowed him to save so much lives, but I want to get a sense of who Borlaug was as a person. What would it be like if he were still alive and I could just sit down and chat with him? So that was what I really tried to get an idea of. And it was alluded to me to a lot of the other people, Dr. Morano, Dr. Runge, but talking to his daughter really allowed me to understand, that this was, a very humble, very down-to-earth guy. He didn't think very highly of himself. He would probably be embarrassed if he was hearing this right now, right? But yeah, this was just a very normal guy who used his talents to do something very extraordinary.
For sure. So obviously you had all this research and you had all these interviews and you sat down to write it. How long did it take you to write the story?
5 hours, and I'd say that 5 hours just a lot of that was just mechanically typing on the keyboard. It was so familiar to me, and I was so invested in it, it just flowed out. I would actually say writing-wise, may have been the easiest story I've written the whole year because it was just so meaningful to me that it came very easily.
Yeah, so when you were writing, what did you decide to prioritize in the story?
I wanted to make sure that everything I said about him was true. I wanted to make sure that it was a very accurate retelling of his life. I didn't want to make it a very clean, a very perfect telling because he ran into a lot of troubles, and as you could tell the story, like his journey didn't come. It was a bumpy road to where he got. But I want to emphasize that in the end, of course, he did get there, and that made all the difference, right? I also want to prioritize his connection to A&M. He was a proud Aggie, and that's part of the reason why we want to tell a story. His legacy that is continued at A&M. I think that's a very important part of the story that isn't as much well known as his story itself. So talking about the work the crop scientists are doing, talking about the work the Borlaug Institute was doing, I thought that was very important as well.
Of course. And when people read this story, what do you hope that they get out of it?
I hope that they get out of it that, we shouldn't take food for granted. He said himself, a lot of Americans, they've never experienced the physical sensation of hunger. We might be hungry, if we go 5 hours and after lunch, but we're never truly hungry to the point that it's life or death. First, we need to be grateful that, that's not a situation that we find ourselves in. But second, we need to understand that that's a situation that we could find ourselves in. So we need to remember that at the end of the day, what's very important, and Ms. Lobby was saying that Borlaug had this view. Things are very important. Agriculture, that's very important. Growing food, and education. We need to continue to teach why farming, why food is important, just so we can understand we don't need to be physically hungry ourselves, but we can understand the importance of eating well, being fed.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you put a lot of effort into this story, and it's very obvious when people read it. So thank you so much for coming on and taking the time to talk about it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
In its final meeting of the year, Texas A&M Student Senate passed new legislation to encourage a widespread system to identify struggling students while continuing their efforts to pursue their LIFT partnership and lobby the Texas state government. Here to talk more about the November 30th Student Senate meeting is news writer Anna Renfro. Anna, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, how did the Senate start their meeting on Wednesday?
The 75th session of the Student Senate began the meeting by commending their current longest-serving senator, computer science senior and engineering senator Sam Jeffress. Jeffress served on Senate for 4.5 years and will be graduating in December. Jeffress gave his last words on behalf, quote-unquote, the elderly of the Senate.
And I understand that the Senate is currently pursuing a system that targets struggling students. Can you tell us more about that?
Jefferson off-campus Senator Andrew Applewhite presented the Student Well-Being Assessment and Mitigation Improvement Resolution. The piece calls for the expansion of the current, quote-unquote, early alert system that identifies struggling students and the creation of further initiatives to reach them. The resolution proposes the expansion of additional resources to help aid students before, during, and after periods of academic and emotional distress. Currently, there is no widespread system that identifies struggling students.
So, are students already using this early alert program on campus?
There only exists an early alert system in 6 classes at Texas A&M. Currently, only freshmen taking the partnered classes are able to participate in the early alert system. The early alert system has 3 tiers for attempting to contact the student. In the first attempt, an academic peer mentor would visit an on-campus student, while off-campus students would receive an email. 3 weeks after the first attempt, the professor of the course will message the student. 3 weeks after the second attempt, an academic advisor will reach out. Jeffress motioned to send the legislation to the Academic Affairs Committee, which was passed by a voice vote.
Okay, and then is there an update on the LIFT bill that was discussed at last month's meeting?
During the period of unfinished business, the Student Senate LIFT Subcommittee Establishment Bill was read for the second time. Originally read at the November 2nd meeting, the bill would establish a subcommittee to pursue the possibility of a LIFT partnership to reduce the cost of local rideshares. As off-campus Senator Fawaz Syed began his period of presentation, Jeffress motioned to enter an executive session. The executive session was a private section of the Senate meeting to discuss sensitive information regarding the bill. Syed, the author of the bill, and Jeffress, the original sponsor, had been pursuing the plausibility of a partnership with LIFT for months.
And was the bill passed?
Student Senate LIFT Subcommittee Establishment Bill was voted on and passed, but the vote count is currently withheld.
Okay, and were there any other bills passed at Wednesday's meeting?
Legislative Relations Chair Pat Engelhardt read the Core Curriculum Advocacy Bill, and immediately motioned to consider the piece as emergency legislation. According to the bill, it would authorize lobbying the Texas state government to, quote-unquote, standardize university core curriculum requirements in an effort to save students money and time. During the period of debate, pro tempore Brandon Rhea debated against Englehart's motion for emergency consideration. However, the Senate agreed with Englehart's motion. The bill would lobby for standardization of Texas core curriculum. All undergraduates are required to complete 42 hours of core classes for a degree. And issues arise if an institution does not accept or recognize class credits from another institution. After the core curriculum advocacy bill was read in its entirety, it was later passed by a vote of 34-0.
Very busy Student Senate meeting. Anna, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, and for today's last segment, I will be featuring a variety of battalion editors and asking them about their Spotify Wrapped. First up is Life and Arts editor Catherine Miller. Catherine, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Who was your number one Spotify artist for the entire year?
Okay, my number one Spotify artist for all of 2022 was Taylor Swift.
And how many minutes did you listen to her?
Spotify told me I spent 7,503 minutes with her.
Wow.
Which makes me in the top 0.5% of Taylor Swift listeners for 2022.
So what were your top 5 artists in whole following Taylor Swift?
Okay, my top 5 after Taylor Swift, so I guess my other top 4. Now, my number 2 is Wallows.
Cool.
I saw them in the summer, love them, so I listened to them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They're my One Direction. Harry Styles, which was pretty surprising because I don't listen to him that much. I listened to the album when it came out, and that was pretty much it.
Mm.
Olivia Rodrigo, which I also feel like I didn't listen to her that much, maybe occasionally. And then the Smiths, which I do know I listen to a lot because I have a Smiths playlist that I listen to on loop in the fall for the vibes.
I like that.
Thank you.
I also like the Smiths.
Yeah, we listen to them together sometimes.
This is true. And finally, what were your top 5 songs?
My top 5 songs, I'll go back from 5 to 1. So my number 5 was All Too Well, 10-minute version, Taylor's version from The Vault.
Oh my god. Are you okay?
No. My number 4, Mary on a Cross by Ghost. I listened to this a lot because it was on TikTok, and it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that song. However, Ghost as a band is kind of scary, but they make really good music. My number 3 was August by Taylor Swift, which I mostly listen to in the month of August. But I just really like the lyrics, Meet Me Behind the Mall. Number 2 was Cruel Summer, which I also listen to a lot in the summer. My number 4, 3, and 2 are primarily from the summer. I listen to a lot of music then. And my number 1 song was Lovers Rock by TV Girl.
Wow.
In which I listened to it 88 times, with the most listens on April 4th, 2022.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I really like that song. So.
It's really good.
Well, Catherine, overall, how do you feel about your Spotify Wrapped this year?
I feel like it's pretty accurate, but also kind of inaccurate. Because I do know I listen to a lot of Taylor. I do know I listen to Lovers Rock by TV Girl numerous times. Pretty much every day in the winter. It's a winter song. However, I don't think some things were accurate. When I went through my top 100 songs, a lot of the songs are years that I listened to a lot in years past, but not really this year. But also I didn't do much music exploring this year, I would say. Just a lot of Taylor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're more of a
lot
classics
Wallows.
person.
I am. I
Like
find
to-
songs that I like and I stick to them.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for coming on
Thank
and
you
telling
so
us
much.
about your Spotify Wrapped.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Up next to talk about their Spotify Wrapped is photo chief Cameron Johnson.
Yeah, let's go.
Cameron, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem. Can the applause go longer, actually? Yeah! Okay.
Awesome. So, who was your number 1 Spotify artist this year?
My number 1 was Steely Dan.
Wow. I don't really know what to say to that.
It's because Caleb likes it, and I want to make Caleb happy when we're playing music. So,
Yeah.
And he gets very excited when I put on Steely Dan.
I
so
see.
I played a lot of it.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about the other 4.
No. So what were your other top 4 artists?
Okay. One of them was Jurassic 5. That's like
Okay.
a hip hop group.
Hmm.
They had a lot of like 90s and then early 2000s stuff. And then A Tribe Called Quest, kind of like the same story. This one I'm embarrassed by, and it's because he's featured on a lot of stuff, but Frank Ocean.
Valid.
And then this one I'm really embarrassed by, but it's only because of Anderson .Paak. He worked with Anderson .Paak, but Bruno Mars.
Mm.
Yeah, because they did Silk Sonic. I had to do like a project on that last semester.
Oh yeah.
And so it's picking up on a lot of like listening to the Silk Sonic release, which was really good. But it makes me look like a bigger Bruno Mars fan than I really am.
Yeah. So what were your top 5 songs?
Number 1 was Nothing from Nothing by Billy Preston.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I have not.
Okay. It's about a guy who won't date women who are poor.
Who are what?
Who are poor, who
Oh.
don't have money.
What does that say about you as a person?
It means I thought that was hilarious.
Okay.
Because it says I played it like only 33 times all year. It was funnier than it sounded, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. Number 2 was Bikes by Rubble Bucket.
Hmm.
I don't know. No Rubble Bucket?
Oh no, I've never heard of them.
Okay. I don't know if that's like an indie song or what, but it was because if there was a 4th, there will be, but if there's a 4th Spider-Man movie, in my mind, that's the song that would play. Because he'd be like really out of it.
Yeah.
And I imagine he'd have, well, I don't want him
He'd
to have a
have-
beard because that would be, someone said he'd have a beard and I think that's a poor move.
No Spider-Man beard.
No Spider-Man beard.
Okay.
Number 3 was Reminiscing by Little River
I love
Band.
that song.
Yeah, that was the one you reacted to the other day.
I love that song.
That one's really fun. I know all the lyrics to that. And then number 4 is Do It Again by Steely Dan. And then number 5 is Ooh Child by the 5 Stair Steps.
Mm.
That's the one that goes, Ooh Child.
How do you feel about your overall Spotify Wrapped? Are you happy with it? Do you
No.
feel like it's an accurate representation?
No.
No.
No to both of those.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed.
You're embarrassed.
Yeah. It doesn't feel youthful at all.
I see.
I just turned 22 and it makes me feel like I've got old people.
Got old soul.
Yeah.
Nothing bad with that. You're not one of those people to go post it on your Instagram or.
No, because I'm never satisfied. The year before, I had one of the songs from the WandaVision score was my most played song.
Hmm.
You can laugh; it's funny. It's ridiculous, but it was like I don't know how many times I played it. It was more than 33. I'm surprised 33 was the
Yeah,
most
that's not a
number.
lot to play
No,
for a top song.
I feel like I've listened to a lot of Spotify too. That was silliness.
Well, there's always next year. What are you going to do now to make sure you're satisfied with your Spotify Wrapped next year?
I'm deleting all the Frank Ocean songs from my list. That's priority number 1.
I see.
Silk Sonic can stay, but I know it'll just put Bruno Mars at the top again. That was a good album, but
I think it's fair.
it
I
had-
think with some explanation, it's a fair answer.
it had fun attitude. And again, like I did a project on it, so there was
Yeah.
a lot of listening and like recording. Do you want to know my audio day? It was poetic angst friendly in the afternoon. I think that's the weirdest one. I don't know where they got these terms, but I guess I'll be less poetic angst
Okay.
in the next year.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the last editor here to talk about their Spotify Wrapped is assistant photo chief and social media editor, Ish Samant. Ish, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us who was your number 1 artist this year?
My number 1 artist this year was Lumineers, which is, yeah.
I really like them.
Okay. Because every time I tell people that, it's like a very mixed reaction. Like, people hate them or like them. There's no
If I'm being completely honest, I don't really listen to them, but I don't think that they're bad.
Okay.
Who were your other top 4?
So it's funny because I share my account with my mother. So, I mean, the top 4 other than the Lumineers were like all like Hindi music artists, which is weird. So like all my playlist is like a mix of songs I listen to and I don't. Yeah, if I had to like choose, it would probably be Labyrinth because after I watched Euphoria, I had like a phase. Like I only listened to his music.
And what was your number one song?
It was One More Weekend by Maddie LaCour. Oh, yeah, One More Weekend. I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Yeah, I've never heard of that song before. What were your other top 4 songs?
Okay, Lady by Blake Rose.
Okay.
Mount Everest by Labyrinth. Affection by Between Friends. Alaska by Little Hurt.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've actually never heard any of those songs,
Yeah.
but I trust your music taste to know that they're probably good songs.
Okay, yeah, but like, I mean, it's funny that you say you haven't heard these songs because like my basic rating was really high.
Really?
Yeah, like I did the Receiptify thing and my basic rating was high and it kind of made me sad.
Oh, I don't think I've done that yet.
So.
Interesting. Well, are you happy with your Spotify results?
I think it reflects what I listen to. I don't think happy is a word to describe.
Maybe not. Maybe like chill,
Yeah.
melancholy,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would call
somber.
it. Yeah.
Interesting.
hmm
Anything you want to see in your Spotify Wrapped next year?
I want to have a lower basic rating because, like, every time I tell people my music taste, I feel like people haven't heard the songs before, but then, like, when I see, like, a 75% basic rating, it kind of kills me inside, so I want that to go down. But other than that, I think it'll continue to be. At least last year was driver's license, and at least it's not that anymore. So...
Hey, I think Driver's License is a
No,
good song.
it's a great song, but I just didn't want it to see it as my number one song. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
you're welcome.
For more information on all stories featured in today's episode, visit our website at thebat.com or pick up a print edition on stands every Thursday. This week's contributors are Jack Lee, Anna Renfro, Catherine Miller, Cameron Johnson, and Ish Summit. Make sure to check out previous episodes of the Batt Signal and Home Turf available wherever you get your podcasts.